So it might not be Mardi Gras, but there is definitely a party on Bourbon Street lately. Pelicans are flying high and they're winning games, finally healthy, and it's just been a really good thing to see out west. Welcome back to the show. Caleb here with my man Noel. And we're going to be talking about one of the hottest teams in the NBA to start the new year. New Orleans Pelicans. How about it, Noel? How about it?
Now, definitely, how about it? Not a team that I think anybody had on their bingo card to be a contender or to be among the top three, top four teams in the West. So, everybody that pretty much had that bet right because they're right around that edge of the play-in team, keeping afloat with everybody. They've had injuries, they've had guys come back from injury, but they've been a fun team overall. And, I think when you take a look at the teams that they're around, they have a very good chance at leapfrogging them within the next couple weeks. And like I said, they may not be a contender by the end of the year, but I think me and you both agree that they are looking like a team that's a sleeper out west. And, if your favorite team it gets a little too comfortable and they see the Pelicans later in the season, don't be surprised if they end their season.
No, it wouldn't be a surprise at all. I mean, you talk about their star players finally being healthy. They have that nucleus of Brandon Ingram, former All-Star, C.J. McCollum, who they got in a trade with Portland a couple years back. But the main guy that everybody knows the Pelicans for, he's really been touted as the number one overall prospect from his draft class, and that's Zion. Bogged down by injuries for the past couple seasons. 2021 was the last time we saw him healthy, and this season in 2024, he's been healthy and he's been producing well.
100%, Caleb. And it's really a shame to see how many games he's missed ever since he got into the NBA because we saw him coming out of high school as this ultra athletic dude, blocking shots from running from half court, doing windmills, getting that iconic 360 dunk when he was playing at Duke alongside R.J. Barrett, Cam Reddish. And really comparing him to LeBron James was the one thing that I kept seeing when he was first coming into the league. And during that lottery, it was just crazy. You had no idea who was going to get that number one pick and have a chance at one of the most generational talents that we had seen in quite some time. To see him weighing in at what he did and being able to move the way he does, Caleb, I hadn't seen anything like it in a long time. Truthfully, even though I hate to say it, since LeBron James, the way that he was able to combine his talent with his physicality was just amazing. And you saw it off the jump when he came into Summer League, caused an earthquake in that game, ripped Kevin Knox, slammed that. I think it was just the perfect entry to the NBA. But since then, it's been a lot of off-court drama. It's been a lot of injuries. It's been a lot of his name being in reports saying that he wants out of New Orleans, saying that he's not keeping up with his nutrition. But he's finally healthy this season. Luckily, he is clearly helping the Pelicans, especially on offense. They are just outside the top 10 in field goal percentage with 58%. He's averaging 23 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists. And even though he's not up to that 2021 production where he was averaging a historic 27 points on 60% from the field, I think the best way to say it is that when he is involved in some way, the Pelicans are playing great, whether it be him setting picks, setting off-ball screens for shooters, bringing up the ball. Because I think every time he drives to the rim, Caleb, it feels like there's 2-3 defenders on him. He's still able to finish through contact. And even when he does meet his match at some point, he's able to find other players. Like I said, averaging around 4 assists. I think that's the biggest key here. And, with the Pelicans taking down some really good teams recently, most notably, I think that game against the Minnesota Timberwolves really showed what Zion could do on both ends of the floor because he was doing his thing on offense, put up 30 points, but he also was locking in defensively. He met Anthony Edwards at the rim a couple times. He was switching from Jared Vanderbilt to Karl-Anthony Towns and to Anthony Edwards, showing his versatility and showing that when he puts in that effort, he can really be something special. And I'm going to get into a little bit later about how I think to start the season, the effort was a little questionable with him, like I think a lot of people have criticized them for in the past. But, I mean, Caleb, this Pelicans team is tough. They're tough. They have a 10, 11-man rotation of guys that, truthfully, I think can match up with a lot of really good teams in the entire NBA, but specifically in the Western Conference. So, I mean, take it from me, Caleb. I know you have a lot to say about guys other than Zion Williamson. I'm going to talk plenty about Big Z for the rest of the video. But, I mean, let's show some love to everybody over in New Orleans because they got a nice little squad right now, and I'm having a great time watching them.
Yeah, they've been really fun to watch, and it starts with their stars, I want to say. C.J. McCollum, getting him in that trade, shooting 44% from three this year, top 10 in the NBA, while still putting up 19, 4, and 5, steal per game as well. Now, he was always in that conversation in the West with how talented the conference was at the guard spot. He was always in that mix of like sub all-star, kind of in that Mike Conley range. And at this point of his career, in his 30s, he might never get that nod, but he's still one of the most talented players in the league as the de facto point guard. Putting up 5 assists, it's been very impressive to see that transition from mainly a scorer next to Damian Lillard to the lead guard in a new location. We know that's not easy to transition from team to team. Brandon Ingram, he's been there in New Orleans for a couple years after that Anthony Davis trade, and this season he's been solid. Lead shot taker and assist man at 5.4 this season, just ahead of C.J. And a pretty balanced effort from him, putting up nearly 22 a game. It's 5 boards on top of those 5 assists. Not as many threes as you would like from a player in the modern NBA, but he's still one of the best mid-range scorers in the league. And Zion as well, he's getting to a career high 4.6 assists. And when you talk about those 3 guys, it starts with them. And I saw a stat recently when those 3, Zion, Brandon Ingram, and C.J. McCollum, all have 5 assists or more on the year. They were 7-0 to that point. And they had done it, I think, 5 straight games, transitioning from the end of last year to the new year this year. Now, they did lose to Denver recently, despite all 3 of them having 5 assists, but still 7-1 when they all move the ball and share it together, set each other up. It's been really impressive to see. And even when their 3 guys are not playing, it's a lot of depth in New Orleans, and it's exactly why they're above that play-in spot. Against Dallas recently, all 3 of those guys were out, and Jordan Hawkins, a guy who I watched at UConn from that NCAA title run, very impressive to see what he did as a Husky, could shoot the cover off the ball, and he showed exactly why. 34 points, led them to a win alongside Jonas Valanciunas, who's been there for a while now. Steven Adams, the fit wasn't exactly great next to Zion, but now you have Jonas Valanciunas, still a steady rebounder, maybe not the best defender, but someone who could gobble up offensive boards and keep possessions alive, and that's been really important for them. You talked about Herb Jones, one of the stingiest defenders in the league, another young guy, and he's shooting threes at a better clip this year, 37%. And just the progression, you love to see it as the 3-and-D guy in the modern NBA, especially surrounded by 3 ball-dominant guys who are already in your starting lineup. And when you talk about health for this team, that's been the problem for the past couple of years. They went on that pretty exciting run back in 2022, taking 2 games off the Western Conference leading Suns. 64-win team, by the way, so no joke there. And Jose Alvarado definitely stuck out in that series, just getting under Chris Paul's skin as a pest and just such a stingy defender. And he's brought a lot of energy. I know he had, I want to say it was an insane quarter against your Lakers before the new year, I should say. Like 3 steals and 2 blocks. 3 steals and 2 blocks in one quarter. And you could feel the energy in the crowd. Everyone was getting hyped, and Bourbon Street is very much alive. You talk about another young player, Trey Murphy, a guy that was an absolute steal in the draft class. Dunk contest participant a couple years ago. So we know he's got really good ups, but he's also shooting the 3-point ball at an insane clip, 39% on about 7 attempts a game. And since he's returned from injury, he's been a really key piece for their bench as well. And then even some of the guys that might not get a lot of mention, Dyson Daniels, another young player that they have, he's top 10 this year in deflection among guys like Kawhi Leonard and Alex Caruso, 2 guys who I think around the league really touted for their defensive skills. So to hear his name among those 2 greats, it's just been really helpful for them. And finally, Larry Nance Jr., playing more as a backup 5 in that role with Zion in and out of the lineup has been really helpful for them. So yeah, they're finally healthy. They're winning a lot of games, and it's just been really fun to see in New Orleans. Really fun.
No, very, very fun team overall. And I think, like you're talking about, giving love to all these role players and the stars in their own respects. I mean, just taking a look at that win against Dallas, where all 3 of their best guys sat out and the rest of the team just stepped up. I think it goes to show the type of culture that is around the team this year. And I take a look at what Zion said recently. He said that when he misses too many shots, he tends to become passive. He tends to kind of lose confidence. But that's where he goes to his playmaking, a big improvement in his career since he's been in the NBA. And I take a look at how the Pelicans have been able to surround him with talent. Like, you broke down everybody perfectly. Pretty much have block strength in Larry Nance, in Zion, and Valanciunas. And then you have perimeter scoring and playmaking in Brandon Ingram and C.J. McCollum. So therefore, Zion could just do his thing down low. He could body up. He can bring up the ball, and he could get into the paint. You have perimeter defense with Herb Jones, Jose Alvarado, Dyson Daniels. Then you have shooting in Trey Murphy, Jordan Hawkins, Najee Marshall. And like I said, they're running about 10 to 11 deep right now. That rotation's probably going to get cut down to about 7 or 8 once the postseason rolls around. But I mean, just seeing what they've been able to do in the regular season, I hope that they're able to make a push and, like you said, stay where they're at right now and not be in the play-in tournament, because when they have been in the play-in tournament, it just feels like things kind of go wrong. You saw Zion get hurt in that 2021 season after he was playing the best basketball of his career. But I mean, yeah, just up until now, the Pelicans looking really, really solid at 24-17 on the season, 9-6 in their last 15 games, and 3-2 in their most recent road trip. Unfortunately, they did fall to the Dallas Mavericks today after beating them previously. And, I just thought it was interesting because you were talking about Jordan Hawkins, someone that Paul George recently compared to Michael Redd. I thought that was a pretty sick comparison, especially because Michael Redd doesn't get enough love around the league for what
he
he
doesn't.
did when he was playing for your Milwaukee Bucks, of course. But
Yes.
yeah. So when Jordan Hawkins dropped that 34-point game career high, the only actual rookie besides, I want to say, Chet and Wemby to score 30 points this season. So, yeah, that is a great company to be in. But he played 36 minutes that game. His 20 minutes per game was his average before that. And then today, when they lost to the Dallas Mavericks, he played 20 minutes once again and scored 9 points. So, I mean, I see a lot of Pelicans fans calling for him to get more playing time. And, he is a rookie, but he's showing that he can stretch the floor. He can get to his spots. So I think it'd be very interesting to see how he's implemented into the lineup moving forward. And today in their loss, they did give up 2 40-point bombs to Kyrie and Tim Hardaway Jr. So, I mean, when Luka's not playing, that team, they play faster. They like to move the ball a little bit more. Not saying that Luka hogs the ball because, his offense is historic. But, just like the Pelicans, someone else had to step up. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. Definitely their perimeter defense. Hopefully guys like Herb Jones and Jose Alvarado don't have to work too hard. And Zion and Brandon Ingram are able to take on more responsibilities. But someone that I want to ask about, Caleb, Brandon Ingram. This is their franchise player before they even landed Zion Williamson in the draft. Obviously, there was that Anthony Davis trade, and he was brought in. And there was that question about how are these two going to fit, Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram. Do you think that they're going to end up sticking together past this season? And do you think they have the potential for maybe a postseason run this year together? Or do you think that this duo is eventually going to be split apart for the better of the team?
I think it's always really tough to say, considering the amount of years that they have on their contract and the considerable youth of both of them. Brandon Ingram, it feels like he's been in this league forever, but he's only 25 or 26.
Crazy.
If I remember correctly. And Zion, for as much hype as he got pre-pandemic, he's still only 23. So I think, honestly, it's a bit too early to pull the plug on that, especially because of the injuries to Zion and Brandon Ingram in recent seasons. Because we've seen what they can do healthy. I honestly think that if Zion was there in 2022, that they honestly could have upset the Suns, because the Suns eventually fell in 7 to those Dallas Mavericks, and they didn't really look all too good in the lead up to it anyway. So I think for this season, and at least for the duration of their contracts, I think they got to stick it out, just because I think this season they figured out how to share the ball more amongst each other.
Yeah.
And even if it's not with their other teammates, the fact that Zion is averaging a career high in assists as well as Brandon Ingram, that's encouraging for sure. You got 10 assists between them two. And paired with C.J. McCollum as that sort of veteran leader, I think that a healthy postseason, hopefully everyone can avoid the injury bug this year. I think you got to see what you have, because the results in 22 were encouraging. Last year was kind of a lost year. But now with Zion healthy, I think you got to give it at least one more run this season.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point in that it feels like both Zion and Brandon Ingram have been around for a long time, and specifically Zion, who was on the cover of 2K, who was on the cover of Slam Magazine, Sports Illustrated, every billboard, every advertisement you could see. He has yet to appear in a postseason game for the New Orleans Pelicans yet, and it's a shame to see, considering that when healthy, he's one of the most dominant and athletic players that we've seen in a long, long time. And just taking a look at this season, I want to go back to what I was talking about, where it felt like a lot of people were starting to get turned off by Zion once again, specifically on December 8th when they had their play-in tournament loss to the Los Angeles Lakers. And Zion scored just 13 points on 8 shots, and the Pelicans lost 133-89. And the big notion was that LeBron James, at 38 years old at the time, heavily outperformed his quote-unquote protege, who used to be someone that everybody thought was next up and who got that label as the next LeBron James. And then just taking a look at his overall health leading up to then, obviously, in his rookie season, only 24 games played. The second year, only 61 games played, and then he missed the postseason where the Pelicans ultimately lost that Phoenix Suns team. And then now he is yet to debut in the postseason for them. So it's really, really crazy to see. And I just think that looking up to that point, he was on the national stage again, had a chance to take down LeBron James and the Lakers. And, not showing up at that time where the Pelicans were 11-12 at that point in their season, it was a huge wake-up call for him. And I definitely think that he got it because since then, the Pelicans have been among the best teams in both offensive and defensive rating. They've been in the top 10 when it comes to points per game, field goal percentage, three-point field goal percentage, offensive rebounds, and plus minus. So obviously there's been a big culture change there. And, just taking a look at Zion overall, Caleb, outside of just the injuries, outside of that, what do you think? How do you think he's grown as a playmaker and a leader on this young New Orleans Pelicans team?
I think taking more of a back seat in terms of scoring responsibility, letting Brandon Ingram lead the team in scoring at one point in the year, I think that's been a big step for him. And like you mentioned, the playmaking, I think he made some highlight passes when he was at Duke. So we always knew he always had those chops in him. But it's really gratifying to see now how that's actually translated into setting his teammates up for open shots, and they've been able to make them. So I think the evolution of his game, the fact that it's not just stagnant, where he's just bullying grown men to the rim, not that he can't do that, because we get a couple of those highlights every single game where it just seems like he's made of rubber and guys just bounce off of him, where he finishes through contact every single game. But it's the fact that it's more than just a one-dimensional side of him this season that I think I've been really impressed with.
Yeah, for sure. And I think obviously the next area of improvement that he could make the next level, jumping from a star to a potential actual superstar in the league, would be getting more of that jump shot going. Obviously, being able to stretch the floor, that would be huge for the New Orleans Pelicans. But I think the Pelicans are just happy to see him healthy right now and out there moving really well, out there getting blocks, going up for lobs, coming down healthy, landing on both feet, because being that big and playing above the rim the way he does, it's just, it's screaming for injury if he doesn't take care of his body. And it just hurt me all the time to see those reports coming out that he wasn't taking care of his body, that he wasn't sticking to nutrition diet plans that the Pelicans had built for him. So hopefully that has all changed. He has come out multiple times and said that despite all the rumors, he's happy where he is at. He doesn't want to go anywhere else. He's been linked to the New York Knicks for, as long as we can remember, Caleb. And he's always been a big market guy. He obviously came from a small high school, but he chose to go to Duke along with two other, I think they were the number 2 and number 3 recruits at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, he loves the spotlight without a doubt. And, hopefully we don't see what happened on December 8th against the Lakers anymore. Hopefully he's not put on a stage and doesn't perform, because you got to remember the dude, when he didn't play in that postseason series in 2022, he was still throwing down, I want to say like East Bay dunks before the game. He was in the warm up.
Yep.
So, he wants to be seen. I think he loves the spotlight. He loves being on highlights. But I had to take a look, and I had to ask my followers on Instagram what they think about Zion Williamson. So appreciate you guys for tuning in and sharing your thoughts on my Instagram. Make sure you guys follow me at Noel, and I'm going to be dropping these stories before every time me and Caleb record. So if you guys want to be a part of the show, share your thoughts. We're going to give you guys a shout out. First up, I got my guy at JP Schoen. He said that Zion is an elite player with a bright future who needs to be more responsible off court. Now, obviously, like I said, Zion, he's been in rumors, he's been in reports for a lot of stuff that doesn't really relate to basketball. But the main ones that I think, like I said, we should focus on, Caleb, are that he hasn't always taken care of his body. And when you look at the money that he's making, that he's essentially the franchise player next to Brandon Ingram. Do you agree with this take right here?
I do. Look, we all know what skill and talent he brings on the court, but just the stuff that came out this summer from she who will not be named, because I'm pretty sure the NBA feds took care of her, and just with his like the talks about his body and the lack of nutrition and how they put like a weight clause in his contract now, like all that stuff. You understand why the Pelicans have done it to protect themselves, but it's just super unfortunate to see that Zion can't necessarily get on track there. But for what it's worth this season, it seems like he's been able to do that, and that return to that all-star level play. We've all been seeing it. So kudos to Zion for at least getting, in playing shape and staying healthy so far this season.
Yeah, it's pretty funny because people when that news dropped that the Pelicans had put like a weight clause in the contract, people started going crazy. Like they were just like they thought like it was the Pelicans taking jabs at him and like going overboard, but the reality is I feel like that's pretty common when it comes to professional athletes contracts, like especially when you're giving them a max deal, you want to protect yourself in every way possible, and you just like you give them incentives, like if guys make the All-Star game or if they make All NBA or if they win MVP, then that's how you're able to get a supermax contract. Well, the same has to go. You have to hold yourself to certain standards. You can't just stop showing up to workouts. You can't just stop, checking in with your trainers. You have to maintain your body and be there for a franchise that's paying you millions of dollars. So, I mean, Luka Doncic probably has one for all we know. I'm sure he has something similar. I'm sure LeBron James had one in the past. I'm sure, all these other guys have different rules for, different franchises. So I don't think when I saw people going crazy that I didn't really understand that. But next up we have at not Paulo9. He just said underrated. I think agreed. I think Zion has taken a lot of disrespect, a lot of heat in recent years. My guy Martin, I don't want to disrespect your last name or username. He said Mariah Mills. Yeah, we're just going to leave that there. We're not going to talk about her.
Next one.
Next one. And then we also have at JDub23. He said that Zion's super talented but damaged goods, needs to get to a big market like New York. So exactly on the notion I was talking about, Caleb, where people think that he wants to be back in the spotlight. I mean, like you said, it's still super, super early to tell. But, I mean, can you envision Zion in another team and in a big market like a New York, a Philly, a Los Angeles in the future? Do you think he would better handle the media out there? Do you think he would flourish?
Oh, man. I mean, the media is a whole other sort of demon there. Because, I mean, if he's kind of getting – to be fair, I haven't really seen him get too defensive with the New Orleans media. I feel like he's taken personal accountability on a lot of things. I know he's stated that he struggled with possibly food addiction in the past, and not being on the court has hurt him more than it's hurt
He said
fans.
he struggled with food addiction?
I believe he said something similar to that in previous years.
The only reason why, like, I'll probably look that up after. The only reason why I do is because I feel like if he like actually said that like in an interview, I feel like it would have been a quote graphic by now.
Yeah, because the internet just does not care.
Yeah, so
until
maybe it was like a little side reference, or it was like report, like
possibly, but I think he's mentioned like something to do with he struggled with food his entire life, which at that point, I mean, like it's a serious topic. As well as these guys are paid for the talent that they have on the court, addiction is real. Like, and
yeah.
it can last in a bunch of different areas that you might not suspect. Like, it might be a joke to a lot of people. I mean, I know way too many people that have been laughing at him and calling him a bust for those reasons.
Yep.
But, if he said that and kind of taking accountability there, like, what more do you want from the guy? Like, injuries, you can do as much as you can to prevent them, but they're part of the game. And, whether that be in a small market like New Orleans or a big market like New York or LA or Philly, these things are going to still persist. Like, the contract's still going to be there. There's going to be concerns about him until he's proven to be a playoff winner. So I think if he could do that in New Orleans and like stay there like AD couldn't, I think that could be helpful to him. Do I envision him anywhere else? I mean, it's kind of hard because you haven't really seen him in another jersey. And I still think he has work left to do in New Orleans. So I'd like to see him stay personally. Yeah.
Same here. I'm all for talented players and stars staying in their small market teams and keeping that parity around the league. Next up, we have Jacob H. Lou 3 said he hasn't lived up to the hype one bit. Pelicans drafted him and traded AD to give him the perfect young core to compete with. And 4 years later, they have accomplished nothing. And yeah, kind of back to what we said, they've dealt with a lot of injuries, some chemistry issues here and there. But I mean, hopefully this is the year to, finally get to see what a healthy Pelicans team can accomplish, and, led by Zion Williamson. So we're definitely going to have to see. I do want to touch a little bit about what he said about the perfect young core. I mean, what do you think about that team that he had when it was Lonzo, Hart, BI, all those guys, compared to the team he has now? Obviously now CJ, he's more accomplished, more seasoned veteran, but I think it's pretty interesting because they definitely had a nice little team going on there, especially when Z was healthy.
Lonzo, I mean, you want to talk about a guy that's been affected by injuries. That's a guy that's been affected by injuries. I know he's set to start running this month, so hopefully he can get back to it. But, the bright lights of LA, they're not for everybody, and Lonzo kind of proved that. Although I think his dad's comments constantly like bolstering him, but he was never going to live up to those expectations, But kind of under the radar because it was a smaller market. He still had those great passing chops. He always had a really good defensive skill set, whether it be getting into passing lanes or being athletic. He's 6'6" as a point guard, so he could move and defend multiple positions. And for all the talks about his poor shot, he developed into a 40% shooter from three in New Orleans. When you talk about Josh Hart, I know we covered him in the Knicks episode. Just one of the best rebounding guards in the NBA, plays much bigger than 6'4". Do I think it was the perfect fit next to Zion? I'm not necessarily sure because it had a lot of positions there that were kind of disjointed. Not the best shooting team other than Lonzo. Josh Hart's not really a shooter. BI, he likes to operate inside the arc rather than outside. So to call it perfect, I think is a bit unfair. They did make some good moves for sure. And getting draft picks later on in his tenure with Alvarado and Trey Murphy. Now, especially Herb Jones, second round pick.
What a steal right there.
But to call it perfect up to this point, I think that's a bit unfair. It can look as good as it can on paper, but if guys aren't healthy, how much can you really evaluate, So.
No, yeah, very, very fair take right there. And then finally, we have at Long Guy Mike. He said, bust TBH. He was supposed to be the next LeBron with his insane athletic ability. And, you can't label someone a bust up until I think you're at least a good 7-8 seasons into your career. That's when I really take a look and I'm like, okay, they truthfully haven't lived up to their expectations. But just from his draft day until now, I can see what you're saying. The LeBron James label did not help anything. The dude hasn't been healthy. The dude hasn't made it to the postseason. He hasn't. I mean, the whole draft class, it's been a very, very confusing and very, very unfortunate one, plagued by a lot of different things. But yeah, when looking at Zion specifically, he hasn't been able to do what everybody thought he was going to do. And, all we can hope is that changes here on out. Caleb, any thoughts on that final entry from at Long Guy Mike?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about that draft class. It's tough, honestly. Zion in and out of the lineup. Ja in and out of the lineup. RJ just got traded to Toronto. He's back home. DeAndre Hunter, 3-and-D guy, hasn't really lived up to the hype. Darius Garland's been an all-star. Jared Culver, that's a guy I think you can consider a bust. Hasn't really lived up to expectations. Kobe White, Jackson Hayes, Rui Hachimura, and Cam Reddish. So you think about that top 10 just alone. I mean, scrolling down the list, best player in that draft class, Tyler Hero, maybe.
Just based off finals appearances.
Jordan Poole, yeah, final appearance right there. Yeah, I mean, not a lot of guys to really talk about in this draft class. For Zion and Ja, they've at least made an all-star team, as well as Darius Garland. But for the rest of these guys, it's been tough. It's been tough. So,
I mean, that could be a whole nother video in itself right there. So thank you, Long Guy Mike, for bringing that to the table for us. But yeah, just kind of wrap things up here. This Pelicans team, just like I said at the beginning of the video, far from perfect, far from being among the contenders. You take a look at the Western Conference specifically, you have three teams in the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the Denver Nuggets, who have a pretty firm grip on it right now, have a good number of games ahead of the rest of the pack. But then you have other rising teams in the Los Angeles Clippers, very, very dangerous team right there. The Sacramento Kings, the Dallas Mavericks, and then the New Orleans Pelicans are right there, right behind those three. So, I mean, just taking a look at those three teams that I said right now, Caleb, that are not necessarily in the top three in the West, but still fighting to maintain that breath of air above the play-in tournament. Where do you think the Pelicans match up in terms of maybe seeing them in the playoffs, maybe seeing them, if they fall back to the play-in tournament? Do you like their odds against, per se, the Sacramento Kings?
If they were to play Sacramento, I think they would have a pretty good shot, to be honest. Knowing that perimeter defense isn't necessarily the strength of Sacramento, although they could change that with a trade. I know that Kevin Huerter has been kicked to the bench. Keegan Murray's been improving on that end, but Sabonis still isn't the greatest interior defender.
No, I think Zion and Valanciunas would definitely have their way with him.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, especially considering last season, if Kevon Looney could dominate the offensive boards like he did and single-handedly change the series against Sabonis, I think that Jonas Valanciunas and a healthy Zion would be able to do equal amounts of damage there.
Yeah.
So,
and one stat I forgot to mention too, Zion he's number 2 in points per game in the paint. this season.
Yeah.
So he's been eating down low.
And I think the only guy he's behind to corroborate that stat is Giannis. And
Giannis,
so, well, like we all know, like both of those guys live down in the paint.
Yeah.
And if there's little to no resistance, I think that could sway a series for sure. You talk about Brandon Ingram matching up against Keegan Murray and then De'Aaron Fox against C.J. McCollum. I think the Pelicans might be able to take him, to be honest.
It would be a fun one, but no, I definitely do. I think I'd say the Sacramento Kings are more built for like a longer playoff run where obviously in the playoffs the game slows down and that's where the Kings get hurt because of how fast they play. But just seeing that they're in year 2 of really kind of getting that motor going and still having a very versatile team and having the pieces to make a trade, I think that if they ran into other teams, they would potentially have a chance. But the Pelicans, like we're talking about, just that 10, 11-man rotation, really excited to see how that's going to be moving forward. I mean, I think we would both take the Clippers over the Pelicans if it came down to that. Or what do you think?
I think you might be able to take the Clippers against anybody right now because since December, they have been rolling. And of course, we did an episode on that. If you want to check it out on the channel, feel free. But yeah, that trend's continued for them. It's been insane what they've been able to do.
Yeah, no, the Clippers, crazy team right now. And yeah, best team in LA by far. But I think when you get to the Dallas Mavericks, that's when it gets really interesting. And really, we're going to end off on this note just because it's pretty perfect timing. We just saw them play 2 games against each other, even though the stars were not healthy in one of them. Luka didn't play in either one. And I think Derek Lively missed a game and a half because he hurt his ankle. So there was that. But I think that is really a really interesting matchup right there because you have Luka and Kyrie Irving who can dominate at the guard spots who are going to put up a lot of numbers. Tim Hardaway Jr. who could heat up at any moment. And then we just talked about this Pelicans team really coming together and having an all-around team. But, I mean, their star duo is a lot different than the Dallas Mavericks. So, I mean, what are your final thoughts on that matchup right there, Caleb?
In terms of Dallas, I think I would take the Pelicans there just because I think they have more consistent guys. And with the defensive sort of core that they have, I think they would be able to control the game better than, let's say, basically Luka, here you go. Kyrie, here you go. Make something happen, please. Because, like, as much as it hurts me to bring Grant Williams up for what he did in Game 7 in 2022, I don't think you're going to give him 18 3-point shots in a do-or-die game again. So when you're relying on guys like Tim Hardaway Jr., he's great when he's on, like today, he dropped 41, but when he's off, and I feel like he's more off than he is on, it's tough to rely on that just due to a lack of consistency when there's only 7 games and you don't have a whole season to sort of build that up. So I think with the talent that they have comparatively overall, obviously Luka and Kyrie, I think they're the 2 best players in that series. But when you talk about the collective roster, because it takes 8 guys, like you mentioned, in a playoff rotation, and I think I would take New Orleans guys. They're 8 over Dallas's.
Sure. No, definitely. I think that's been your big gripe with Dallas for a minute too, is that the talent that they have just put around Luka is not up to the par that it should have been with the time that they've had to put together this roster. So yeah, we're gonna have to see who gets active right around the trade deadline. I'm itching for more deals to go down. There was that Wizards and that Pistons deal, but
not even worth a mention.
That was just something that we kind of brushed aside. It's 2 teams that are far from the playoff race and are going to be far for a while. So, I mean, we're just waiting for that Zach LaVine, that Siakam bomb to come through. That
DeJounte Murray bomb could come at any moment.
Yeah, those are super hot right now. So, yeah, Caleb, my man, thank you for joining me. I mean, hopefully this Pelicans team can make some more noise and could get the respect. And, this Western Conference is no joke, like we're saying. Just, I think unknown is just the perfect way to describe how everything is starting to shape up. So, any final thoughts on the Pelicans before we head out?
Just finally happy to see them healthy, and hopefully they can sustain it for a playoff run because I think they might be able to knock off a couple of these teams up top if they do. So, yeah, just hope they hold on until April because we got a wild west out here for sure.
Yes, we do. We have Wild West. We have a wild couple weeks on the way. So make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell, smash that like button. Make sure you go follow my man Caleb at Caleb Nguyen on Instagram and the Nguyen column as well. My guy just got a nice gig. He's going to be announcing where he's going to be writing, covering news very soon. So stay tuned. Proud of my guy. Thank you guys for joining.